Professor, thank you very much for your time. The word on whether there's an actual link, a causal link, between this very rare situation of blood clotting and the Astrazeneca vaccine is officially not yet. Did you see anything, or have you seen anything in the trials conducted in South Africa with AstraZeneca that raised concern for you?
So good evening, Sally. And the short answer is no. And that includes in the studies that were done in the United States as an example that included more than 30,000 participants, where they didn't observe any sort of signal with regard to the type of side effect that's currently being reviewed. And we're not too sure whether it is causally related. So the most recent concern relates to what is known as central venous thrombosis, which means as clotting of the blood vessels in the brain. And that could lead to a stroke as an example, in addition to which there's a decrease in what is known as platelets, which are an important component of the blood that assists the body in terms of preventing bleeding. Now, this data is currently being reviewed in the United Kingdom as well as elsewhere in Europe, and the incidence of this particular event is estimated to be 1 out of every 600,000 individuals that have been vaccinated. Unfortunately, with the clinical trials that are done, it's almost impossible to identify those sort of rare side effects, even when enrolling over 30 and 60,000 participants. So these are not type of signals that you would pick up in clinical trials itself, and it's something that if in fact there is a relationship, would only manifest when you're using millions of doses of the vaccine.
So it's all about calculated risks. We know that there's no medical intervention without some form of risk. And our correspondent in London making the point that of 18 million people vaccinated in the United Kingdom with AstraZeneca, 30 cases of clotting, 7 deaths so far. But of course, no one wants to have any risky odds, and which is of course why the UK, I think, is still deciding whether young people who have such a small risk of dying of COVID should take the risk of AstraZeneca while there are question marks. It's very minimal risk, as you've explained, but doesn't it increase the fears of people who are vaccine hesitant and also add information that the anti-vaxxers are going to use?
Unfortunately, that is very likely to be the case, where anti-vaxxers would leverage on this particular example to suggest that vaccines are actually unsafe and haven't gone through adequate scientific interrogation, which is not true. Like I mentioned, it's not only for this vaccine. Many other vaccines that are used also got extremely rare side effects in the magnitude of 1 in a million. And again, there's always a risk-benefit ratio that needs to be evaluated. And even in a young age group, as an example, if you assume a case fatality rate of 0.01%, as an example, in individuals under the age of 40, after being infected with the virus, if there's 1 million people that are infected, if out of 1 million people, even if only 10% of them are infected with the virus, the 0.01% case fatality rate comes up to about 1,000 people dying from COVID-19. Relative to 1 in a million actually experiencing this sort of a side effect. So it's all about the risk-benefit analysis. And even in the presence of the side effect, if it is causally related, the benefit would clearly still be in favor of vaccination.
And, of course, here in South Africa, we're not going to use AstraZeneca because it doesn't seem to be effective against the variant that's dominant here. But we do know that Johnson & Johnson, the manufacturing deal, is going to see millions of vaccines roll out from as early as the middle of this month. Also, we're hearing the news that the Pfizer vaccine deal has been signed and sealed with the Department of Health, and we should see deliveries also in a few weeks' time. So that's great news for those who choose to get vaccinated. Interestingly, Ollie Barrett in the United Kingdom, our correspondent, saying that even with the concerns about the vaccine, it isn't more and more people are seeing people safely vaccinated. It's not actually putting them off. But just getting back to South Africa, with these deals signed, Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer, there have been so many delays, so much concern that we're losing valuable time. Are you hopeful now that we are on the right track to smoothly, quickly and efficiently start rolling out our vaccines in the coming weeks?
So I think it's great that we've now been able to finalize the deals in terms of the quantity of vaccine that's going to be made available. Obviously, the devil is in the detail in that we also need to know what are the timelines when the millions of doses of vaccine will start arriving into the country. If we start vaccinating, as an example, in May, unfortunately, it's probably going to be too late to mitigate the consequences of what likely will be a resurgence come the end of May, June. So it's all about not just the total number of doses, but how soon those doses are going to go into the arms of individuals, which will really determine the benefits of vaccination in South Africa. But that being said, I think it's a positive signal that we have now at least been able to tie down these deals to get vaccine through Johnson & Johnson as well as Pfizer.
Thank you very much for your time. That was Wits Vaccinology Professor Shabir Mahdi.